Hey guys, this is my review of Godzilla vs. Gigan. I'm currently reviewing all of the Godzilla films on this channel in release order. And I'm really excited to talk about this one in particular because when I was a kid, Gigan was my favorite Godzilla enemy. In fact, I did a post on this channel maybe a month ago when we reached 10 subscribers. As a joke, I did like a 10 subscriber Q&A post. And I think someone asked me who like my favorite monster was, or maybe my favorite like Godzilla enemy was. And I'm not really 100% sure because there's a couple, right? And I'm looking forward to rewatching all of these films so that I can kind of, get a better idea of how I really want to rank them. But when I was a kid, Gigan was like my favorite. I used to collect Godzilla toys. Like I remember, before I, ended up throwing them away or giving them away or whatever, or losing them, I had quite a collection of different Godzilla toys by the time I was like a teenager. And Gigan was, one of my most prominent, collector's items. Like anytime I saw like a toy Gigan, I wanted to get it. So, yeah, I was really excited to revisit this film. But I know that there are some films that there's some movies with Gigan that I liked more than others. And when I realized that this was the Godzilla vs. Gigan movie that features the Godzilla Tower and the Godzilla theme park, I had kind of a negative feeling. I was like, man, I don't think this was one I liked too much as a kid. It wasn't my favorite. But obviously I had to watch it to like see, what I remembered and how I really felt about it. Anyway, I want to kind of jump into like some notes about the film so we can kind of read it together. Like I try to like organize everything here. So where would it be best for me to put my cam here? Maybe like I can just put myself right over here, right? All right, so the director was Jun Fukuda, so he's back after the director of Godzilla vs. Hedorah got pretty much like blacklisted for that film, which again, like, I complained so much about that movie, but I honestly, like, I'm just disappointed. I think Hedorah could have been so much better. The budget, this really drove me crazy. Apparently the budget for this was around 30 million yen, and I thought this was crazy. Because the last budget, like the previous budgets for the previous films, was around like 90 to 110 million yen. So this is like slashed by like 70%. I couldn't believe it, but I did some further research, and apparently this is true. This is listed on Wikipedia, Godzilla wiki pages and stuff, that this budget was 30 million yen, lower than many earlier entries, reflective of the series' mid-70s cost cutting, roughly in line with or slightly below the reduced budgets of the early 70s films that followed Hedorah. That's insane. That is an insane slash to the budget. When you can see that like Godzilla vs. Hedorah was like, I think 90 to 100 million yen is the rough estimate for that. 30 million yen for this. When I saw this for the budget, I was like, man, I kind of have to go a little bit easier on this movie. Like I have to be a little bit more forgiving with this film because that's an insane slash to the budget. Production schedule, we don't really know the filming window, but it was pretty typical. These lower budget films were being churned out like annually, one film a year, sometimes two in the same year. Reception, Rotten Tomatoes, sitting at a 67%, but that's only on 6 reviews. IMDb 5.6 out of 10 with 6.5K ratings. So 5.6 out of 10. Do I agree with that? I think up front, like, I mean, I think that this one is probably around a 6 out of 10 to me. Probably, somewhere around a 6 out of 10. I think it does have somewhat of a strong ending. But it does take a long time to get there. Godzilla doesn't get involved in any, and you see this in the lower budget films a lot. Godzilla doesn't really get involved until like the last 30 minutes of the film. And then you get like, pretty much 30 minutes of almost uninterrupted, monster action with Godzilla. And it's kind of a mixed bag. So, yeah, I think like, man, it's tough. I think anywhere from 5 to 7, depending on how generous you want to be and what your priorities are with a film like this. And obviously, I think your age comes into play. I think as a kid, I probably would have rated it higher. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. I don't think that's like remarkably unfair or like remarkably like overly forgiving. I feel like that's pretty fair. Critics mixed to mild, fans generally more favorable for the monster action Gigan design. Again, I love Gigan. We'll talk about Gigan a lot more later. Camp value despite the cheapness, yeah. Suits and stock footage. I noticed that in this film, Godzilla wears, there's like a lot of different Godzilla suits used, it seemed like to me, so I asked about this. Godzilla uses the worn Soshingeki Goji, aka the Gigan Goji, previously in Destroy All Monsters Attack Hedorah. There's other suits used as well, but it's mostly from stock footage. Gigan is a new suit, which was really cool. Heavy stock footage. So this film features stock footage from all of these other movies. 7+ minutes of stock footage. It felt like more. I'm going to be honest with you, it felt like more, but it's a lot of stock footage. And, now that I see the budget, I understand why so much of it was used. Notable production notes. This was the last film with Haruo Nakajima as Godzilla. He retired afterwards. First Godzilla film to show significant blood, which was kind of sick, and we'll talk about that, but in the fights you do get a lot of blood, and I thought that was pretty cool, honestly. Producer Tanaka pushed a return to classic multi-monster alien invasion style after disliking Hedorah. Okay, so this is something that I don't like, but I understand it. Like, after Hedorah, the producer was like, okay, or this producer was like, okay, we're gonna go back to safe. We're going to go back to like a safe, formula that worked previously to get the franchise back on track. It's a shame that Gigan was introduced this way because I think Gigan is such a cool monster. But coming into the franchise at this point in time where they wanted to return back to another alien invasion, alien monsters, and, another like, this is a tag team film, Godzilla and Anguirus versus Ghidorah and Gigan, which I didn't know that Ghidorah was even going to be in this film. I didn't remember that, so that was a really cool surprise to see Ghidorah up here. But yeah, I mean, I kind of hate that. I do appreciate how experimental Godzilla versus Hedorah was, and again, it just had it. I don't think it was. I don't think that like the potential was there, but they didn't execute on any of it, and it's a shame that. Because of that, they wanted to play it so safe with this movie, and I'm sure that it also hurt the budget for this film a lot too. And I just hate that because I just have a soft spot for Gigan because he was like my favorite monster growing up. I mean, obviously Godzilla was my favorite monster, but Gigan was like my favorite like design monster, like my favorite enemy for a long time. And I kind of feel like he got the short end of the stick in this film, and I think that's why when I was a kid I didn't appreciate this film as much as other movies that maybe Gigan appeared in. Theme park setting, the World Children's Land, and the Godzilla Tower, meta manga artist subplot. That's kind of like some plot stuff, and we'll get into that. But basically, the theme for this movie, they touch on technology and they touch on the pollution again, which I think is really cool that they kind of like wanted to touch on that again, although it did seem kind of out of nowhere when it was done. But kind of in order, like the film starts with the main character. His name is Gingo, I think is how you say it. And he's basically a manga artist who is trying to find a job. He's going around with these different companies, trying to share his ideas. He's kind of a goofy character, and there's a lot of comedy in this film, which, I don't think that it was bad, but I also didn't like how it clashed with like the more serious monster action. I mean, think about it. In the monster fights in this film, you have Godzilla and Anguirus both getting like slashed and cut open by Gigan, and there's blood shooting everywhere. Godzilla gets his face, like his head split open by Gigan at one point in the final fight. It's pretty sick stuff. It's pretty cool. The monster fights are pretty serious, and I think that there's a lot of elements of this film that are like pretty serious, especially the opening. Like the opening of this film to me is pretty sick. It shows Godzilla like, and he blasts his breath directly at the camera, and then they cut to like this opening, and like Akira, I can't remember his last name, I'm so sorry, but the guy that, you know, has been doing a lot of the music for the Godzilla films, the, you know, it's probably terrible, but you know who I'm talking about. He's back, and this intro music, you have these violins that are just like going hard, like beating hard like drums. You've got these laser sound effects. The intro, again, you know, and this is something I've noticed in other Godzilla films, the intro gives this very serious tone, like you are locking in for a serious monster movie, with maybe even some horror elements. And you know, and I noticed the same thing with Hedorah, and I'm sure that's not the only film I've said this about. It goes from like a very serious introductory tone that I like and I'm like completely on board with, and then you start introducing us to these characters, and like our main characters, it's essentially like, you know, it's a manga artist and like his business girlfriend. I'm not really sure 100%. I think they're boyfriend girlfriend. His name is Gingo. I think her name is Tomoko or Tomoko. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. I'm sorry, but she's like his girlfriend, business partner, boss, who's also a black belt in karate, which is kind of random, but I also thought really cool. She ends up kicking ass in this movie. There's a couple of scenes where like she walks in on, you know, the gang and they're in trouble. It's like, so, I just kept thinking of Scooby-Doo, like, or like old cartoons from like probably like the 70s, where they were like solving mysteries and stuff. It's like this ragtag group of friends. It gives those vibes, and it just clashes so much with that opening like music and that opening tone and the sound effects, like the laser sound effects that they're using, which I think is to allude to Gigan. I hated that, you know, I hated how it clashed, and I really felt like, and I've been feeling this way for a long time, I feel like this series is just like the franchise has kind of lost its identity a little bit. Like it's moved so far away from the first film, Gojira. It's moved so far away from that, and now it's become less of like a piece of art that has like something to say, and it's become more of a product where they're trying to sell it and they're trying to make money with it. That's not totally bad. I'm just going to be honest with you. I know that, like, you know, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, even when as I'm saying the words, I'm like, I don't like that very much. But the truth is that, you know, that's not the worst thing in the world, because you can still, like, you want to monetize this further and you want to make it into a big blockbuster movie franchise. We've seen that can be done. And that can be done well. It's just like when you do that not well, it's even worse, you know? Like, even when you do it well, there's some people that will not like the fact that you're moving away from the origins of the franchise, that you're moving away from like the art and the statement, and you're moving more towards like just popcorn entertainment. There's some people that no matter how good you do it, they're not going to like that. But if you do it really well, the majority of people will accept it. But if you don't do it well, that like minority, when you do it well, suddenly becomes like a majority, or it feels like a majority. Their complaints become amplified through like the general distaste for the film because it was just not very good. Anyway, I'm sorry for dragging on this, but like, I just feel like, you know, you want to monetize this, you want to turn it into, you know, popcorn entertainment. That's fine. Just do it well. We've seen some movies do it well. I think maybe even in some ways Godzilla vs. Hedorah did it better than this film does. But anyway, getting back to like our Scooby-Doo plot that's going on in this movie, Gingo is trying to get a job as a manga artist, like coming up with basically monster mangas or mangas. I'm not sure how to pronounce that word. I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. But basically like comics. He's trying to create monster comics basically. So his girlfriend's helping him go around and basically interview for jobs, and he goes to this place called World Children's Land, which is so weird. And I noticed this in a lot of the Godzilla films, that whenever a lot of the companies and organizations, even like the Japanese version of NASA, the Japanese like different government organizations, a lot of them are called like World Defense Force or International this, World that, International this. Like very few things in these, it feels like, maybe I'm wrong, but I just kind of had this thought as I was watching this film, that it feels like there's not a lot of Japanese used in the names of different organization. Japanese Defense Force, Japanese Space Force, the Japanese blah blah blah. And I'm wondering if a lot of that is like fallout from post World War II stuff, where maybe there was pressure to not use that language, and maybe there was pressure to make everything the World Organization, the International Organization, United Space Organization, United Space Defense Organization. Like, I wonder if they were kind of pressured into using that more inclusive language because of like, maybe Western audiences would be more accepting of that, and maybe there was still some lingering, distaste for lingering from World War II. I don't know, but I was thinking that. Let me know in the comments if you have anything to add to that, if I'm right or if I'm wrong. I'm kind of curious. I didn't really have a chance to research it, but I thought about it. Anyway, he goes to World Children's Land, where they're building a giant Godzilla tower, which is like, I think, one of the most memorable things about this film. And sadly, other than the introduction of Gigan, that might be the most memorable thing about this film. Because as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, I remember that tower. Like, I've watched this movie a lot as a little kid, man. Yeah, I remembered that tower, and then I was like, I think that the Gigan film with the tower wasn't my favorite, but I don't remember why. But I'm going to find out, and I find out. But let's keep going. So he goes there for like a job interview, and he meets like the director and the chairman. So the director interviews him first. The chairman seems like in charge of everything, but they're clearly boys. So the director immediately looks like a villain, and the chairman, they both have like this kind of sinister aura about them, where you can just immediately identify that they're villains. Anyway, when our main character Gingo meets them to talk about like his ideas for like mangas and like different monsters that could be used as like entertainment, they seem to like his idea and are like, sure, like let's hire him. Let's, bring us all your ideas for monsters. We want this to be a place of peace. And then they go on, like when he's talking with the director is obsessed with the idea of absolute peace, which I thought was kind of like clever foreshadowing, because, Gingo's like, well, I mean, it's, we're not at war right now. It seems pretty peaceful to me. And then the director character, whose name I can't remember, or maybe I didn't learn, I'm sorry, either way, he was like, no. This peace is superficial. It could be shattered at any moment. We want absolute peace, eternal peace, which, hints at peace through force and dominance. And so I thought that was kind of like a clever language, clever writing. I liked it. And what ends up happening is that, one day when Gingo's coming into work or coming in for another meeting or whatever, as he's coming into the building, a girl is running out of the building, runs into him, and she drops a tape. And she's like clearly scared as shit, and she takes off running. And he's like, what the hell was that? You dropped this tape. She just keeps running. Then the director that interviewed him comes running out of the building, also runs into Gingo, and is like, where'd she go? And Gingo like has a bad feeling. And it's funny too, because it's really well written. He's, when his girlfriend is asking him about this job, because obviously they want to hire him, they want to use him to help make the place more entertaining for kids and stuff like that, and I'm sure there's something more sinister behind it, but they don't really expand on it a lot until later. He says that he feels really uneasy about the place because of their constant talking about peace and, like, you know, eternal peace and stuff like that. And I thought that was, I think that was clever, and I think that made sense. Like, it was awkward the way they kept mentioning it, so I thought that was cool. Anyway, he points the opposite direction, so the director and his lackeys, they run off the other way. He picks up the tape and keeps it, doesn't know what to do with it, goes in. Then it's his first time meeting the chairman, who is like the boss over everything. And, they basically tell him, oh, that girl that ran out was, like, not just like an industrial spy or whatever, but she's a disturber of the peace, basically. She's an enemy of peace, which... what does that even mean? But I also think it was weird, and this is like something that continues through this film. The bad guys constantly overshare with everybody. So, like, for instance, when Gingo is asking about, hey, who was that girl that was running out of here, and what did she want? They just tell him. Basically, they're like, oh, she's an enemy of the peace. She's trying to, disturb our plans, to bring peace to the world. And, she's a spy and she stole some tapes from us and blah, blah, blah. And, that continues throughout the movie. The plot basically ends up being that her brother worked there. And, one day he went to work and never came home. And it's been like 3-4 days. He hasn't come back home. So they think he's been kidnapped or he's being held hostage there. And she's trying to get evidence to prove that or find out, where her brother is or if he's safe. That's what's going on. And the brother's there. They are holding him as a prisoner and they're forcing him to keep working as they're trying to work on some sinister plan. And he's like a tech engineer working on their technology. But even with him, like, he's not constantly under surveillance. He's allowed to, like, walk around freely while they're doing things. And they're constantly having conversations with him kind of openly or semi-openly about their plans. They do that the whole movie, and it was just something that was, a little bit annoying. Like, I don't think it was terrible, but they do it multiple times, and it always is a little bit frustrating to me when, like, the bad guy with a secret plan decides to just openly share his secret plan, I think you could say, well, that speaks to their arrogance, but I don't know. They had a lot to lose if their plan didn't work out, so I didn't really like it too much, to be honest with you. So, our main character, Gingo, ends up running into that girl that stole the tapes and her friend. They pretend to rob him. Like, the friend walks up on him with, like, corn on a stick and pretends it's a gun, and he's, like, standing there. The guy's behind him. He thinks he's got a gun to his back. The girl's like, give me the tape back. He doesn't have the tape with him. He ends up fainting. When he wakes up, he's at their house, and they end up basically, like, telling him, like, hey, we're sorry, but, like, her brother's been kidnapped and we're trying to save him, and something bad's going on there, et cetera, et cetera. And so your kind of, like, Scooby-Doo team starts forming. You've got Gingo, his girlfriend, and then the sister. Her name is Machiko, and her friend Shosaku. I don't know what to tell you. I'm an idiot. But the brother is Takashi. So Takashi's being held prisoner, and the girl, the sister, and her best friend, are trying to save the brother. And so that's kind of like the Scooby-Doo, mystery solving, like, human plot of the movie. And that goes on really for the majority of the first hour of this film. You don't get really any monster action at all until maybe like 30 minutes in. They end up playing that tape that the girl had found, and the tape is like just gibberish. Like, it's this weird, like, I don't know how to describe the sound, but it's like this weird gibberish, like annoying scraping kind of noise. And when they play it, the director and the chairman are like alerted that, oh no, one of the two tapes is being played right now. Like, what does this mean? And basically, the tape cannot be understood by humans. It's in a different language, but monsters can understand it. So like the monsters on Monster Island can understand it. Godzilla and Anguirus can understand it. So when the tape is being played, I guess like as the signal's being sent out into space or whatever, they cut to Godzilla and Anguirus, and this was one of the things that annoyed me the most in this film that they decided to do. And maybe audiences liked it, maybe kids liked it. I don't even think I liked this as a kid. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, maybe I did. I don't know. I can't go back and ask myself, and my memory is garbage. But they cut to Godzilla and Anguirus while this tape is being played, and then what they have is Godzilla and Anguirus making this same like whiny, scraping, like tape fast forwarding, rewinding noise. Like if you ever like fast forward or rewind a tape really fast, and you know how it sounds. I wish I could describe the sound better. They speak in that language. Like Godzilla and Anguirus make those sounds at each other, and it's almost like a comic book, like where this text, like there's a speech bubble that pops up next to them with text, and they're literally talking to each other, and then you get it explained in Japanese or English language or whatever. You get it explained to you. I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention, I don't even think people will care. I think this movie came out in 1972, so I think this is like, again, 1 year after Hedorah. Anyway, I don't know why they decided to do that. Like, I like it when they're subtle about like the emotions or the communication between monsters. I like it when because at the end of the day, they're monsters. They're not humans. And I don't like it when they humanize them too much. And like literally having them for no reason make these weird noises to each other and then showing speech bubbles like it's a comic book panel or a manga panel or whatever. I just didn't like that. I really didn't like that. I thought like that was too much. And maybe that's just me. I'm not saying that everybody feels that way, but I didn't. I felt like that was like too. I just felt like it was too much. There's so many other ways of communicating the emotions or the intent of the monsters in these movies. Sometimes you have the humans explain it themselves. Sometimes it's body language. Sometimes it's, where their eyes look or expressions on their faces even. Like they have ways to do it, stomping, pointing. But just having them like talk to each other, I've always thought that was corny. I'm pretty sure when I was a kid, I thought that was corny and I didn't like it. Because I feel like the more you humanize their, their expressions, the less of a monster they seem. You know what I mean? And they lose a little bit of that, that monster aura, so to speak, and they become more humanized to the point of like the thing that really makes them unique and special is that they're kaiju, they're monsters. And I disagree with removing so much of. I think you do inherently lose a lot of that when you humanize them. So I've never liked that. It's a personal thing with me. I'm not saying everybody agrees or that anybody agrees, but that's how I feel. I really didn't like them having, giving them speech bubbles. I just thought that was so lame. And I think it's also kind of dumb because like from a plot perspective, because I don't know what the tape is saying, right? They never explicitly say what any of these tapes are saying, right? They're obviously communicating orders between these aliens that are, in this like happy world construction or whatever. What was it? World Children's Land. This place is being run by aliens that are projecting human forms, and they're obviously communicating with their home world, which is like M Space Hunter Nebula, I think, which is a weird name, but okay. I mean, that doesn't really matter. That's irrelevant. But that's the world they're from and who they're communicating with on these tapes, I think. Anyway, when Godzilla and Anguirus talk, Godzilla says, "Hey, Anguirus, monster that has basically no special or remarkable abilities at all, almost no offensive capability outside of just like running through stuff and sheer size. But yeah, other than that, mostly ineffective. You go check it out. So he sends his buddy Anguirus, and this kind of is a buddy film, a buddy monster movie in some ways, in a lot of ways actually. So he sends Anguirus, and Anguirus goes to Japan to check it out and see what's going on. I think it's so funny. I don't know why they decided to do this. Obviously, I think it's the budget. Like they needed at least 2 monster scenes. They needed like a not mid-film, but I think this movie is about 90 minutes. So about 30 minutes in, Anguirus shows up to Tokyo and has a fight with the military. And then an hour in, so 30 minutes in, you have that. Another 30 minutes later, you have the final battle, which goes for about 30 minutes. But a lot of it is stock footage that really takes away from it. So this is one of those like places where I really have to be lenient, because I understand that, like, man, they really gave you no budget for this movie, So I have to be a little bit forgiving of this. But I think it's funny. Anguirus shows up to Japan, and the National Defense Force is waiting for him. I can't remember if that's what it's called in this film, but that's what it is. The army's waiting for him. And they're alerted that he's showing up from Monster Island. As soon as he shows up, like, he doesn't attack or anything. He arrives, he kind of comes ashore, and he's like looking around. It's at night. Again, I appreciate that a lot of these scenes are shot at night, because the miniatures don't look as bad, the suits don't look as bad. I think that I still think we're in that era of Godzilla films where the more scenes are at night for like miniature sets and for the suits and the gods and the monster fights, the better. Personally, I think it's just more believable at night. I think less flaws show at night. Anyway, he shows up at night, and the National Defense Force immediately repels him. Like, they just bomb the shit out of him with, like, tanks and, whatever other weapons they use. I can't remember. And he's just like, what the fuck, guys? And then he just leaves. He's like, I'm out. Like, they're just shooting him in the face over and over again, and he's just making his roars. And then he's like, I'm out. And he just turns and leaves. So I thought that was kind of hilarious. He has to go all the way back to Monster Island. And then, like, him and Godzilla are like, okay, well, we'll go together. So him and Godzilla come back together, and that's when they have the final fight, Godzilla and Anguirus versus Ghidorah and Gigan, which it seems really unfair to Anguirus, and it is, because Anguirus gets mauled during this fight. But he has a couple of moments, but, like, God, it's such an unfair fight for him anyway. But also, there's one thing in this that I think is really funny. There's a scene where they show Anguirus swimming, like he's left Monster Island and he's now swimming on his way to Japan. And they show him up close, and he's swimming like this, horizontally, the way you would expect. Like, his spine's up and his body's underwater. And then for some reason, I don't understand why they did this. They include a shot from long distance. And, you can see him down there still swimming towards Japan, but he's standing vertically. Now, it's a really long distance. Like, so he's like, he's basically like a dot on the screen, but it's obvious that the actor in the suit is walking. And if you are familiar with Anguirus, the actor in the suit is always on his hands and knees. And he's obviously swimming horizontally. When they show that, I laughed so hard, because I'm imagining, can you imagine Anguirus standing vertically swimming like this? Like, just waddling through the ocean? Like, it's so dumb. And I think they had him standing vertically so that you could see him better with that long distance shot. But the problem is that, like, once you process what you're seeing, if you use your brain at all, the next logical thing is going to be like, wait a minute, why the fuck is he swimming like that? Why is he standing in the middle of the ocean waddling? Like, what? Anyway, it was just goofy and funny, so I thought I would talk about it for a minute. Then we basically go into like our investigation mode where, we have our team of Gingo and, the sister, her best friend, and his girlfriend who like, she doesn't have that many scenes. Like she's kind of in and out until later. But during this middle part, she's kind of not there as much. Anyway, they decide to, they're still trying to find the brother, so they decide let's do like kind of a background check on the chairman and the director of this organization. So they start looking into it. That's when they realize that the actual people that the chairman and the director are the people, the humans that they're pretending to be. They find out that those two human beings died a year ago to the day, which is a strange coincidence, but a year ago to the day, those two guys, one of them was a student, one was his English professor, they died. They don't say how they died, but they were like climbing a mountain, Mount something. I can't remember the mountain, I'm sorry. But it doesn't say if they were murdered, if it was an accident. They don't go into details, but they're dead. And then, the chairman and the director themselves end up, when confronted about it by, our gang here, they just end up saying like, yeah, we're actually, insects, aliens projecting human forms, and these are the forms we're projecting. And they kind of get a little bit into their lore. And, their lore, basically, this is kind of where they kind of touch on the pollution aspect, is that there's a planet that they're from, far away. I guess this is M Space Hunter Nebula, or it's in that nebula. I don't really know. I don't know how nebulas work. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. This is why I make YouTube videos. They're from a planet that is like Earth, and it was there was a very prosperous civilization on that planet, like humans, that ruled that planet, and they were producing so much pollution and nuclear waste from bombing that they basically destroyed their planet. And the only beings that could survive in that nuclear waste environment, well, that's our aliens. So they weren't the humans. They were the only thing that could survive in that nuclear wasteland. They inherited the planet when the human-like species on that planet basically destroyed themselves through pollution and stuff. And now they found Earth, and they want to come to Earth. They see that there's a human species here that's on the same trajectory, so they want to take over the planet and stop us from being complete idiots, destroy all the monsters that could threaten them, and rule with an iron fist and basically enforce peace on the planet. And, hey, look, some parts of that don't sound terrible. You want to stop all the pollution and stuff, but, the whole by force and dictatorship thing doesn't really work for me. I don't think it works for most people, so they are the bad guys. But this was the first time in the movie, like, when they were having this conversation, I was thinking to myself, like, are they cockroaches? Like, are they just like alien roaches? Because, that's kind of like the thing that people say, like if there was a nuclear holocaust, like only roaches would probably survive, which I don't know if that's true or if that's just like a saying. I've never looked into it, but in my head, I was like, wait, are they roaches? They are. They're just cockroaches, and they're not like alien cockroaches. Like at the end of the film, when they finally die, before they, die, as they're dying, their projection goes away. They're literally just large household, like wild, just roaches. They're just human Earth roaches that are really big. Gross, and again, kind of not serious. Like, I really feel like if they're aliens and they're from an alien world, why would you just make them giant cockroaches from Earth? They didn't even change the design. They're literally just roaches. It seems very unimaginative to me and kind of goofy. And again, it goes against what I think is like a more serious tone underneath that's trying to be the dominant tone of this film. But again, with our main cast of human characters, even there's a lot of like comedic moments and joking, and even the way they dress and the way they look. And I get it's the 70s, but a lot of it is, there's just a lot of elements that to me seem like they're comedic elements, and they prevent that more serious tone that is underneath from really shining through. And I kind of wonder how this film would have been different if that was allowed to shine through. But anyway, they end up saving the brother, who, what was his name again? I can't remember. Takashi. They end up saving Takashi with the dumbest, like, again, Scooby-Doo plot ever. They sneak in and they find him, and they, of course, get caught by the aliens. And then, of course, that's when the aliens just, like, exposition all of their evil plans, which I've never been a fan of. They end up being put into like a cell together. Like it's basically just a room, though. It's not a cell. Like I said, like they never treat him like a proper prisoner. There's no handcuffs. There's no binding. And when he's put in his room, they just lock the door. But the window can just be opened. And so they end up like, what's that word when you like, slide down the rope? I can't think of the word, but you know what I'm talking about, right? When you grab that little handlebar and you slide. What is the word? Rappel? Whatever. Anyway, they end up escaping through the window of the Godzilla tower and rappelling down. I'm going to say rappel, but I don't think that's even the right word. They end up sliding down on the rope and escaping. And then they end up doing this thing where, okay, the final fight starts happening around this point in the film, right? They finally get the brother out. Godzilla and Anguirus are on their way to Tokyo. The aliens play the second tape because, like, the first tape got played, and now they're like, our plans are speeding up. They receive orders from, the alien planet, M Space Hunter Nebula, sends them a message and says, okay, go ahead and move forward with the plans. They play the second tape and they summon Ghidorah and Gigan, which has a really cool intro. Like you see a red orb and like a blue diamond coming through space. And at first they're just lights out in space, and then the camera zooms in and you see them like flying. Ghidorah is like this black and red orb. It looks like red materia from like Final Fantasy VII or something. And then there's like this blue diamond, metallic diamond, flying through space. And then the red orb transforms into Ghidorah, which was a pleasant surprise because I didn't know he was in this. And then the diamond explodes and it's Gigan, right? And that's the first time you see Gigan, and I think it's actually a really sick intro. Like the way it's done is really cool. I kind of wish the red orb would have exploded too, but they kept it different. It just transforms. But I thought it was like a really cool introduction. And then they kind of show them like goofily flying through space, and they do like a fucking loop-de-loop for no reason. And, the flying is really stiff, and they look like dolls on strings being flown through space. So I don't think that looked too great, but the initial introduction of them was really cool. They come to Tokyo. They land in the center of Japan, and they're being controlled by the aliens in the Godzilla tower, which is like this huge, like 5, 6, 7-story building or whatever. And probably bigger than that, because it's a little bit taller than actual Godzilla, so probably more than that. But anyway, point I'm trying to make is that at the top there's a control room where they're using these tapes and using these instruments to control Ghidorah and Gigan. So they're being controlled, and they land and they start destroying and wiping out Japan. And the destruction is really, really good. Let me see. This is about 50 minutes in when Gigan and Ghidorah arrive. So we have about 10 minutes straight of them attacking Tokyo and attacking Japan. It takes a really long time, by the way. Like, the Defense Force knows they're coming. Like, the National Defense Force, they show a scene of them knowing that they're coming. It takes them forever to get there and, like, actually confront Ghidorah and Gigan. Not that it matters, because they immediately get stomped out. But we get a very long, like at least 10 straight minutes destruction sequence. I think it's great. Like, if you like seeing monsters destroy Tokyo and destroy Japan, you get a ton of it right here. Ghidorah and Gigan both are just like wrecking everything. And I think Godzilla and Anguirus show up around the hour mark, somewhere around there. One thing that I really hated, they do it throughout the movie. And this is a budget thing, so I have to be a little bit forgiving here. Throughout the movie, they are using stock footage. Throughout the final battle, they're switching in between new footage and stock footage. So what does that mean? That means that you're constantly seeing different Godzilla suits. And these early Godzilla suits, I mean, it's probably even true today, like with Godzilla designs in more modern Godzilla films, but back in the Showa era, these Godzilla suits looked very, very different. Like, the proportions of the face can be wildly different, proportions of the body, things like that, shape of the mouth, eye shape, the spines. They're constantly shifting. Sometimes within like a 30-second period, you see 2 or 3 different Godzilla suits, it feels like. And it's just really jarring. It's visually very jarring, and it breaks immersion constantly because you're seeing stock footage. And it, as a Godzilla fan, as somebody that's watching all of these movies, and I have to imagine that Godzilla fans felt this way when this movie came out in the 70s and they watched it. It's like, dude, I've watched all these movies. I know when you're showing stock footage. Like, maybe a new fan won't know that, but like only like little kids wouldn't know that, because these movies are being pumped out year after year after year. So even a teenager who is a big fan is still watching these movies every year. So even like a 15 or 16-year-old kid, if they're a big Godzilla fan, is noticing all of this stock footage. I noticed it when I was a little kid, and I understand now that was one of the reasons why I didn't like this movie that much. I also really didn't like I feel like Gigan was not utilized correctly, and I really feel like they kind of let this character down in several ways with this final fight. Now, when Gigan shows up and starts just destroying buildings and destroying like tanks and like planes and stuff in the military, it's all cool. But then you have this moment where Godzilla and Anguirus show up, and you have the standoff. It's a tag team battle. Godzilla and Anguirus, and then you got Ghidorah and Gigan. And they this is Godzilla's first time seeing Gigan. So I think that, their first interaction, you want to show, this is your new monster, right? And I love Gigan's design. Like, I've said it a million times, I'll always say it. I love his design. I think he's really cool with like the hooked arms and the sharp bladed hooked arms and the saw blade that goes through his body and his stomach and chest. His mouth, he's got like this beak almost like a bird. He's like a mix of like bird and machine. And then, he has like this weird shaped eye that's pretty cool. And then like, I don't think he uses it in this film, but he's obviously got this point above his eye where he can shoot a beam. He has like a beam attack that he can use there. His tail. I really like Gigan. And so I was really disappointed when Godzilla's very first interaction with Gigan is Gigan as a monster. One thing he likes to do is use flying attacks a lot, which you might not think. I kind of wasn't prepared for that, but Gigan likes to take off really suddenly. Gigan can actually impressively go from, walking to, taking off and flying. And it's really cool. But in this movie, the first interaction between him and Godzilla is Gigan like takes off flying towards Godzilla. Godzilla just shoots him with his breath, and Gigan comedically, he's flying, he gets hit with the breath. It's like the blue breath. Of course, with all this stock footage, you get a couple of different Godzillas and a couple of different breaths, but most of it is like your typical blue, traditional Godzilla blue breath that causes explosions. And I think the spines still light up. I can't remember. I think a lot of the times he uses his breath, it's really up close, so I didn't see the spines lighting up a lot. But he just shoots Gigan, and Gigan, stiff as a board, you see him get shot with the beam, and then he just like comedically, like stiff as a board, just falls, and then just like falls through a building. That is his first interaction as Godzilla's as Godzilla's opponent, as Godzilla's enemy being introduced. This is his movie. Like, I know Ghidorah is there, and I know that Ghidorah is the stronger monster and, is more of a threat. I hate that Ghidorah was there. I believe that he was brought in, one, so that they could utilize stock footage. They needed an old monster for stock footage use. I get that. I think that's why Anguirus is there, too, because they can show Anguirus. They can show stock footage of Anguirus versus Ghidorah, stock footage of Godzilla versus Ghidorah, because everything with Gigan obviously has to be new. I get it. But this is Godzilla versus Gigan. Gigan's name is in the title of this film. This is Gigan's movie as much as Godzilla's to me as a fan. And for his first fight, literally his first interaction with Godzilla, to be him getting owned in like in almost a laugh-inducing way, I hated that. I hated that so much for Gigan, and it honestly reminds me of Hedorah. I loved Hedorah as a monster. I think his design was super fucking cool. I think the concept of him even cooler than Gigan. Gigan's just like a space bird machine or whatever, right? I still like his design, but the origin, like his lore, isn't really fleshed out at all in this movie. I mean, he's a monster that's under their control. Is he from there? Was he, is this a tragic situation where he was a free monster and they took over him? They trapped him? I don't fucking know. But with Hedorah, there was all of this like great lore and great design, like so much potential there, and just wasted. And he's never utilized as much as he should be. So it kind of reminded me of that when I saw that happen as the fight gets started between these four monsters. I just laughed to myself, man. I was like, here we go again. Like, why would you do that? Why? Like it's like a 10 out of 10 blunder to me. Like, I can't put into words how frustrated I was that is like his introduction with Godzilla the first time they fight. It gets better from there, but I feel like that was a huge blunder. Anyway, it then cuts during this final fight to our main characters having a meeting with the National Defense Force. Out of nowhere, I don't know why. Like, they went to the police and the police wouldn't help them. Now they've saved the brother. They go but I don't know how it makes no sense. But for some reason, they're having a conversation with the leader of the National Defense Force at their HQ, and the National Defense Force is like taking notes from our like Scooby-Doo motherfucking main character team, and they're like, we need to come up with a plan. We got to take out this tower. And then their plan is so goofy. They end up blowing up the head of this tower, because one cool thing about this tower is that the mouth of this Godzilla tower can shoot this laser beam that's blue also, like Godzilla's breath, but it looks very different, which is cool. And, during the fight with Godzilla and Anguirus versus Gigan and Ghidorah, eventually, the stock footage and the fight is pretty good overall, but a lot of it with Ghidorah especially is stock footage. And Godzilla humiliates Gigan at first, but then Gigan starts using his like flying attacks successfully on Godzilla. A little later, he's distracted by Ghidorah. And Anguirus doesn't really do much but gets shot at. What can he do? There is a scene where like Ghidorah is charging at Godzilla, trying to hit him in the head, and I think he does end up shoving Godzilla down, but Anguirus like crawls in front of Godzilla, I think like as a like making the sacrifice for his boy, like blocking his boy, and then he gets shot up by Ghidorah and smacked around by Gigan. It just is what it is. I mean, what can you really do? But we get our first like blood splash. Like, it starts to get really good when Gigan flies by Godzilla and has his saw blade going and slashes Godzilla's like shoulder neck area here, and blood just shoots everywhere, and Godzilla grabs it and falls down. And Gigan ends up knocking Godzilla into this like happy children's land or whatever it is. What was it again? Yeah, World Children's Land or whatever. He knocks Godzilla over there near the Godzilla Tower, hits Godzilla in the head several times. He actually ends up like picking Godzilla up and hitting him in the head several times and like splitting him open, and Godzilla's like bleeding from the head and stuff. It's, you know, like stuff like that was really cool. Like the blood and stuff was really cool. At one point, Anguirus is trying to get to Godzilla to help him, and Gigan blocks him and has the saw blade going and is like, what are you going to do? Try to run through me? And then, you know, Godzilla's getting like shot by the beam from this Godzilla tower. And, you know, Anguirus ends up trying to run to him, and Anguirus' face gets fucking slashed with the saw blade, and blood flies everywhere from Anguirus' face, which, by the way, you never see that wound again. And I think with the shoulder, there's maybe a little bit of, like, red paint there, and then on Godzilla's face, there's a little bit of red paint, but you never really see a wound again. I'm okay with that because you see all the blood on Godzilla, but with Anguirus, like, you just never really see anything with his face again, even though it looked like he had a really serious injury there. But they do a really cool thing where when Gigan is hitting Godzilla into the theme park and then Godzilla like gets up, he's like, he can't really see well. His vision's very blurry, and he sees like this Godzilla tower standing across from him. And like I said, it's his size and it's realistic looking. So Godzilla like, you know, finally like shakes the cobwebs loose, and he's looking, he's like, what the fuck? And he sees like this other Godzilla, and he starts roaring at it like, who the fuck are you? By the way, they keep the mouth wiping thing from the last movie, from Hedorah. So they did keep that, which I didn't mind. They want to keep him like wiping his mouth and kind of gesturing. Again, that's not really, I think, too bad if they want to have him express himself. So they keep that a little bit. And then obviously like the Godzilla tower starts shooting him with the beam. Godzilla falls down. They're like, the beam attacks are just constant, while Ghidorah and Gigan are keeping Anguirus from helping, and the humans are like, oh god, like, you know, they're gonna destroy Godzilla, we gotta save him. So what's their plan? What's their plan that they pitch to the National Defense Force? And then the National Defense Force is like, okay, yeah, that's the plan. They're like, you know, do you think they're gonna shoot it with a missile? Like, send the National Defense Force to, like, destroy the tower? Like, send jets to shoot missiles at it and destroy it? Like, would totally make fucking sense? Nope. What they do is, there's, the way this tower, Godzilla tower is built is, like, there's a Godzilla tower standing like this, and under Godzilla's, like, mouth, there's an elevator that goes down to the ground floor by his feet. They fill that elevator with explosives, and then my man just draws pictures of them in black and white, like a manga panel, right? Or like a comic book panel or whatever. He draws all of them on paper and then puts it in front of the explosives, and then they send the elevator up. And then, like, you know, in the control room, you see the director. He's like, hey, there's an elevator coming up. Those assholes are back. Shoot to kill. You know, just kill them. We don't need them anymore. So as soon as the elevator opens and they see these drawings, the henchmen just like start shooting at it. It sets off the explosions, and that's when like it destroys the head of Godzilla Tower. It kills the director and the chairman, and you know they randomly insert these conversations. It's so out of left field. Where they have these conversations about, like, you know, where did we go wrong? Like, we trusted in our technology. We had the best technology. How? And then they turn into cockroaches and die. And then the humans are having conversations about, like, see what happens when you trust too much in technology. It almost destroyed the world. Like, technology may be of great assistance to us, but it also has the power to destroy the world. Not necessarily a bad lesson, and probably even more relevant these days, but it's just that it comes out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's so out of left field and pushed in, and I'm not 100% sure why, or like, you know, what was going on in the culture at the time. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's because it's still pretty soon after the war, and that's still like a big topic is war and nuclear power and stuff like that. But yeah, they kind of shove in these dialogue lines about, the dangers of technology, and I thought that was interesting. Not bad, but it feels very forced in. Anyway, we get back to the main monster fight, and Ghidorah and Gigan are winning. I think that these scenes are really great. They do throw in stock footage throughout the entire final fight, which I think really brings it down. But the new scenes are great. Godzilla is like so beat up. Even after they destroy the tower, like Godzilla's been shot with that laser beam so many times, and it's obviously doing a lot of damage to him. This is when actually Gigan picks him up and just starts hitting him with those curved bladed hands, like right in his face, like right between his eyes, and is splitting him open and bloodying him. And then he has Ghidorah. Okay, I should also mention that when this head gets destroyed, obviously they no longer have control of Gigan and Ghidorah. I always thought to myself, what a shame that they always say, Ghidorah or these space monsters or whatever, they're being controlled by the aliens, right? That implies to me that maybe if they weren't under the aliens' control, they wouldn't necessarily be doing all this shit. Like, what would, I've always wondered, like, what would their natural behavior be? Would they be so antagonistic? Would they be so destructive? Would they want to fight Godzilla if they weren't under the control of the aliens? Well, when the Godzilla head's destroyed and Gigan and Ghidorah are free, they're kind of just like stunned at first. They're just kind of standing around and they're like, what the fuck? It's like they're coming to their senses. Godzilla's down because he's been like beamed so many times. And Anguirus, this motherfucker, like, Anguirus starts like walking up to them, and Anguirus is like, I guess he's just still mad because he's been getting bullied a little bit in this fight, and he's like, nah, fuck you, I don't care if you run the control or not. And it looks like Anguirus is going to try to kick a boulder at Ghidorah. And it's so sad to me, like, or it's such a shame, because I feel like this is an opportunity to show the audience, well, I'm naturally curious, what's Gigan and Ghidorah actually like when they're not under control by an alien? But they just end up doing the same shit they were doing before, man. I do think that Gigan especially starts to show a lot more personality when he's not under control. He seems very buddy-buddy with Ghidorah. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think that maybe this relationship of Gigan and Ghidorah being buddies and being like a tag team duo, I think that continues through the franchise. I don't think this is the last time we see that relationship between them, but I can't remember, honestly, if we see it again like this. But yeah, Anguirus looks like he's going to kick a big boulder at Ghidorah, and one of the Ghidorah heads is like, no, the fuck you're not. So he shoots Anguirus. And then Gigan looks around and he's like, okay, I guess we're still doing this then. That's when he picks Godzilla up, hits him in the face. Godzilla's all bloody. He tosses Godzilla over to Ghidorah, and he even goes up and puts his blade around Ghidorah's wing, like, hey, check this out. Come do this, And it's like they're like kind of like plotting like, hey, you fuck him up. I'm going to fuck him up. Like, pass him to me. Kind of like this kind of back and forth going on with them, which, it is humanized somewhat. But it's not so over the top and blunt that it like was bad. I actually didn't really mind it. It was kind of cool to see Gigan show a little bit more personality, as long as it's in bursts, in small bits. I don't mind it. So Ghidorah ends up like tossing Godzilla into what's left of that Godzilla tower, and for some reason, even though Godzilla's like basically almost knocked unconscious. Gigan had to pick him up and hold him up. Godzilla was just like out. For some reason, throwing him into that tower like pissed him off, and he starts knocking the tower down like Godzilla versus Kong or King Kong versus Godzilla. He starts knocking the tower down, and he turns around and he's like snapped him out of it. I was like, okay, I guess. And, he starts fighting Ghidorah again. And, of course, they cut to footage from Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, and Invasion of Astro Monster. They're cutting back to a lot of footage from those movies, showing Godzilla, like, dodging the beams and, like, kind of boxing with Ghidorah and stuff. Some of the same attacks with Anguirus. It was a bummer, it was a bummer to see so much stock footage being used at pivotal moments in this final fight. But it is 30 minutes. It is basically 30 minutes long. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of good and bad here in this final fight. But one cool thing that they do here is Godzilla is able to turn King Ghidorah and Gigan against each other for a brief moment, and I thought that was really a really cool dynamic that I didn't expect. I can't remember how they do it, but like I think Godzilla, knocks down Gigan. There's like a bit of ground and pound where he finally gets a leg up on Gigan, knocks Gigan down, and is like literally just like beating him in the face like it's a UFC fight. Pretty cool. He's sitting on Gigan's chest while he's punching him, and I just kept thinking, if you use that saw blade right now, bro, I don't know why he didn't, but if he did, that would have been funny. But anyway, I get why they didn't do it, but it would have been funny. Godzilla's between Gigan and Ghidorah and is taunting Ghidorah. Ghidorah's heads shoot the lightning at Godzilla, and Godzilla like moves, he dodges it, and they hit at Gigan, which pisses Gigan off. And I can't remember exactly how it happened, but Gigan ends up getting knocked down. I think maybe Godzilla hits him from behind, or Anguirus does. And, Gigan gets knocked towards Ghidorah, and Ghidorah's like, get off me, and starts like shooting at Gigan. And Gigan's like, motherfucker, like, I'm your boy. Like, you want to do this? Do we have a problem here? And Godzilla goes over to Anguirus while basically Gigan and Ghidorah are arguing. Godzilla goes over to Anguirus and they start speaking in that weird tape language again, which is so unnecessary. They don't use the speech bubbles, thank God, but they're clearly like planning. And Anguirus goes behind Ghidorah, jumps into Ghidorah spine first, and knocks Ghidorah into Gigan. So, they get knocked into each other, fall down, they hate each other, they're getting mad at each other. Gigan gets up, he resets his sights on Godzilla and starts flying again to do flying attacks. Bro, he gets up and flies like 3 times in a row, like either away from Godzilla or towards Godzilla. And each time Godzilla just shoots him with his breath immediately and he falls down into a bunch of buildings. And, again, I don't mind it. It's at the end of the fight. This is when Godzilla and Anguirus it's their turn, to beat their ass. It's time to win the fight. It's time to end the fight. And obviously Godzilla and Anguirus are going to win. But I just feel like Gigan, he got some stuff in, but I feel like he didn't get enough. I feel like he didn't get enough shine in this fight. Godzilla shoots him down repeatedly. And then while Gigan is down, they go over and Godzilla and Anguirus start beating, I mean literally the dog shit out of King Ghidorah. Godzilla does this crazy thing where he grabs all 3 of Ghidorah's heads and like he's from behind. He grabs his heads and bends Ghidorah's heads backwards to his back, and he like hooks them. He like underhooks all 3 of the heads, and he's like calling Anguirus, and Anguirus just keeps jumping with his spines directly into Ghidorah's chest, and they do it like over and over, like this double team move. Listen, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was cool. I was like, damn, that shit's gotta fucking hurt, dude. And they do that multiple times, and then Godzilla uses Ghidorah's 3 heads to basically suplex Ghidorah, reverse suplex. So like from behind, flipping him like where his body's going face up and then like face down. He suplexes him, like reverse suplexes him like 3 times in a row by his 3 heads. I don't know why Ghidorah couldn't shoot his breath, but it's not that big of a deal. Maybe there was a reason. But he body slams him and like throws him 3 times, and it looked brutal. Then he starts stomping his neck, which those are, that's stock footage from like Invasion of Astro Monster or something like that, where he keeps stomping the heads and, blood is shooting out of one of the mouths and stuff like that. And then, Ghidorah and Gigan have had enough. They flee. They flee. and then our human characters talk a little bit more about how, they throw in another one of those lessons about technology and, how we got to be careful. Technology is so dangerous. And then Godzilla and Anguirus leave, and then this really cringe Godzilla song starts playing, which, you hear it in Japanese and you don't know the lyrics, and it's like, okay, I don't know what they're saying. Okay, there's like this end song playing as Godzilla and Anguirus leave in the water, which they reuse and recycle this over and over for the endings of these movies. It's the monsters leaving in the ocean, and then like some song plays and fade to black. But it's okay. But because I'm watching the Criterion Collection and I have the English subtitles, so cringe. Like the lyrics were so bad. Maybe it was a good song, but lyrically, like, very on the nose. Like it did not translate well. And then fade to black, and that's the movie. So that's Godzilla versus Gigan, and overall, I think the thing that hurts this movie the most is that there wasn't anything really remarkable about it. There's so much stock footage of the monsters used. You don't get Godzilla in the movie till an hour in, which is brutal. You do get a big, like, 30-minute fight at the end, which takes some of the sting off. But at the same time, so much of it is stock footage, so you can't even appreciate it completely because of that. So the human characters are okay. Like, they're not bad. Like, I don't think the actors are bad. They used unknown actors for this film. I think hardly anybody from a previous Godzilla film shows. Maybe the leader of the defense force, but I can't remember. But they used relatively unknown actors. I don't think the actors were bad or anything like that, but, I'm not going to remember this random, manga artist. And I'm not going to remember his girlfriend. I'm not going to remember the brother or the sister. The aliens being cockroaches is just weird. And that's about all I'll remember them for. I remember the Godzilla Tower. I remember the introduction of Gigan. And that's about it, man. That's really about it. And I think, like, how bloody the fight got with Godzilla being cut here, and then Anguirus being cut in his face, and Godzilla being hit in the face multiple times. I remembered that from my childhood because it was so brutal when he just kept hitting Godzilla in the face and split him open. Like, there were, but in totality, or in total, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's very few memorable moments to this film, and I just think that's such a shame, especially for the movie that introduces Gigan. What a shame. It's very inoffensive. It follows a previously established formula, relies on a lot of stock footage. It uses a lot of the same, music from previous films, which is fine. It uses a lot of appropriate music. I think the music is fine. The plot with the humans and, them, like, trying to rescue the brother, it's all just fine. It's not very good, but it's not like offensively bad either. It's very milquetoast. It's very mild. It's very inoffensive. It's just fine, And I think that's kind of how I feel about this movie overall, is that it's fine. I wouldn't be against watching it again, but I would probably fast forward through the first, like, half hour of the film, maybe even the first, like, 40 minutes. I mean, like, I don't know if there was anything so captivating about the human drama or the human plot. I don't know if anything about it was captivating enough that I would want to sit through it again. But if I did have to sit through it again, it wasn't terrible. So this is very much a 5 or 6 out of 10 for me. Very middle of the road. I wanted to like it more. But I want to end by saying that when I found out the budget for this film, and we already know they're churning them out every single year. So this had to be written, and produced and sets built and suits made and all that stuff everything new, like it had to be made within a year, probably less than that, probably like 6-7 months total from when they started writing the script maybe to when it was done, probably 6 or 7 months maybe. So that's already going to drastically affect the quality of the films. I don't care what anybody says. It's really hard to make a good film when you're especially in a franchise this annual, terrible situation they're in. But when I saw how much their budget was cut, I really gained a lot more respect for this movie and the people that made it, because I think that the fact that this movie isn't horrible is kind of a miracle, I think, given their budget. I really do. I think the fact that the movie is flawed, it's not very good, but it's also not very bad. It's somewhat forgettable. It's inoffensive. It's formulaic. It uses a lot of stock footage. You know, the biggest sin of this film is how forgettable it is, how little of it is truly memorable. That's the biggest sin of the film. But when I look at the budget, I still think that's an accomplishment. And so overall, I really would give the people that made this film, the actors, the writers, even though like there were a lot of things in the writing that really didn't make sense. Although shout out to what's her name, the girlfriend, the manga artist's girlfriend. What was her name again? Tomoko. So she's the black belt. She ends up like walking in on them being held up at gunpoint and beats the shit out of like the bad guys. And there's a couple of scenes where she uses her karate and stuff and beats up the bad guys, and it's pretty cool. It's not like some weird cringe, like to me, it's not like some weird cringe like girl boss stuff like we get in like a lot of modern Western entertainment now. Well, I guess it is more of a Western thing. I don't know. But I actually thought it was really cool. They didn't get to do a lot with it, but I think she had 2 scenes where she was beating up the bad guys. And I mean, some of it wasn't good. Some of it was like not choreographed really well, but I'm not going to sit here and just beat this team over the head with how I wish this movie was better when I see the budget that they were working with, the time constraints and stuff like that. Overall, I really think they did a good job. I do. I think they did more than good given the budget. It's crazy to me that this movie is anything above a 2 or a 3 with this budget. I think if you adjusted my rating for the budget, I would probably give this like an 8 out of 10. If you adjusted for budget, probably like an 8 to a 9 out of 10. And I'm not being I'm not exaggerating. I really think that for the budget, yeah, I think there's an adjusted score there that's like an 8 to a 9 for what they did. So I honestly like have a lot of praise to offer for the people that worked on this movie and that made this movie, because I think that they made a much better film than what anybody would have expected of them. Anything that I never would have predicted this movie was this good on that budget. So I want to give credit where it's due. And that's my review of Godzilla vs. Gigan. So what is next? What is the next Godzilla film? I'm going to guess Megalon. I think Megalon is around this Godzilla versus Megalon. Am I the GOAT or not? Godzilla vs. Megalon, 1973, the immediate next film in the Showa series. So, I'm going to be checking this out. You want to know something really funny? I mixed up Megalon and Hedorah on the last review, and no lie, I sat down and started Godzilla vs. Megalon by accident. And I got like 20 minutes into that movie before I was like, something's not right. Like, I don't know what it was, but I was like, something's not right. Like, I don't think this is right, dude. Like, I don't, this, it seemed like, you know, I know that these movies are being made every year, right? So there's not a whole lot of evolution happening. When there's like noticeable evolution in the way the films are being made or something, like I pick up on it immediately because it's like an annualized series. You know, it's like if there were drastic changes to like Madden or FIFA or Call of Duty or something, right? So when I watched like 20 minutes of Godzilla versus Megalon, and I was like, I don't think this is the right movie. I don't think this is next. And so I started looking, and it was Godzilla versus Hedorah I was supposed to be watching. So I have watched the first 20 minutes of Godzilla versus Megalon. I'm not going to talk about it, though. I'm going to save it. I'll see you real soon for that review. I'm really looking forward to finishing it because what I saw at the beginning, I'm real interested in it. I'm real interested to see how the rest of it goes. Because I see potential here. I see potential. Is Megalon a roach also? Megalon, isn't Megalon, because I don't think I even got to the point where Megalon shows up in the movie. Isn't he like a giant bug? So we go from like these bug aliens to like another bug alien, but it's the monster, right? Like, is that what we're doing? I don't know. Is it a beetle? I can't remember. I'll see you in the next video for Godzilla versus Megalon. I'm going to get to it soon. Anyway, guys, like, subscribe if you want to. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Godzilla vs. Gigan. I keep telling myself that I'm going to do like Son of Godzilla again. I'm going to sit down and just do like 20-minute reviews, but I just don't know if I know how. I don't know if I know how. I don't know how to stop talking about Godzilla. And I'm kind of starting to wonder if these are like reviews or just some kind of weird therapy session. Anyway,